Herkese merhaba. Ben Tuğçe Ergüncireli. Bugün sonunda bu konferansa başlıyor olmak çok zevkli. Umarım hep beraber çok güzel bir gün geçireceğiz. EIT Food Türkiye Hub'ı olarak hizmet eden Impact Hub İstanbul oluşumu olan Foodback'in kurucu ortağıyım. 2018 yılından beri Türkiye'de tarım ve gıda sektöründe değişim yaratan girişimlerin büyümesi için çabalıyoruz. Hızlanma programları, mentorluk, kurumlarla bir araya getiren programlar, eğitimler tasarlıyoruz. 3 yıldır da sektörde bir araya gelmesi zor kişileri bir arada düşünmeleri ve çözüm üretmeleri için konferansımız aracılığıyla bir araya getiriyoruz. Bugün tarım ve gıda endüstrisine çok farklı yerlerden bakacağız. Bir panelde tarım teknolojileri konuşurken başka bir panelde gıda atından, restorancılıktan söz ediyor olacağız. Sanatı teknolojiyle birleştirmiş müthiş parlak girişimleri tanıyacağız. Hücresel et, hayalet mutfak gibi günümüzün gıda problemlerine teknolojik çözümler bulan kişileri de. Biz bu farklılığın bir araya gelmesinden müthiş keyif alıyoruz ve bunun çözümler getireceğine inanıyoruz. Pandemi, iklim krizi, Rusya-Ukrayna savaşı bize gıda konusunda aslında ne kadar savunmasız olduğumuzu gösterdi. Gıda tedarik problemleri tarım teknolojilerinin önemini arttırdı. Yatırımcıların bu alana daha çok ilgi göstermeye başladığını gördük. Ve her krizin bir avantajı olduğunu düşünürsek de gıda tedariği ve beslenme konusunda bu kadar hassas iplerle hayata tutunuyor olma hissinin tüketicilerin farkındalığının arttırdığını düşünüyoruz. Bu yüzden de sektörün bu kadar yenilikçi, değişim yaratmaya gönüllü kişilerle dolu olmasının harika olduğuna inanıyorum. Konferansın dinleyicilere ilham vermesini, değişim yaratmak için harekete geçirmesini hayal ediyoruz. Bugün dinlediğiniz kişiler arasından tanışmak veya işbirlik geliştirmek istedikleriniz olursa lütfen bizlere ulaşın. Hep beraber değişimin bir parçası olalım. Herkese güzel bir gün diliyorum.
Herkese merhabalar. Ben Ayşe Sabuncu. Impact Hub İstanbul'un ve Foodback'in kurucu ortaklarındanım. Tuğçe'nin söylediklerine ek olarak şunu söylemek isterim. Aslında Gıdada Etki Konferansı'nın bu sene ikincisini yapıyoruz. Geçtiğimiz sene adı Annual Food Agenda'ydı ve yeniden aslında yapmak istediğimiz misyonu düşünerekten ismini değiştirdik. Geçtiğimiz sene Annual Food Agenda'da biraz daha gıda zinciri içindeki sosyal ve çevresel problemlere yönelik seanslarımız vardı. Katılanlar hatırlar. Daha fazla farklı problemleri ve gıda zincirine yönelik alanları sorgulayan bir perspektiften bakmıştık konferansa. Bu sene ise Tuğçe'nin de söylediği gibi biraz daha ileriye dönük bir perspektif izliyoruz ve ileriye bakıyoruz. Aslında ne tip çözümler olabilir? Bu çözümler nedir? Bu çözümlerle alakalı farkındalık yaratma amacımız var. Ama bu tabii ki şu demek değil. Bu alanlardaki veya çevremizdeki meselelerle alakalı sorgulayan bir perspektifimiz olmayacak. Bunun için aslında AirMeet şu an içindeki olduğunuz platformda sağda ekranınızda bir chat platformu var. Ve aynı zamanda da konuları tartışabileceğiniz bir lounge ortamımız mevcut. Buradan da gün boyunca konuşmaların aralarında vakit buldukça ve öğle arasında buraya girip konferansa katılan diğer kişilerle konuları sorgulayarak siz de kendi alanınızla ilgili konuları keşfedebilir. Gene bu sorgulama perspektifinden yaklaşabilirsiniz. O yüzden lounge alanına da mutlaka gitmenizi ve oraya uğramanızı tavsiye ediyorum. Bir de sağ üst köşede bir people köşesi var. Oradan da konferansa katılan tüm kişileri görüp onlarla Tuğçe'nin de söylediği gibi etkileşimde bulunabilirsiniz. Tabii ki biz de size destek oluyor olacağız ama AirMeet platformunu da bu şekilde kullanabilirsiniz. Umarım çok keyif alırsınız bugünden. İçine çok efor gitti. Tüm ekibe de ben teşekkür ediyorum buradan eforları için. Şimdi sözü ilk konuşmacımıza tanıtmak için Tuğçe'ye veriyorum.
So I'd like to introduce you to Philip Lymbery. He's the global CEO of farm animal welfare charity, Compassion World Farming International. His life purpose for over 25 years has been to make a meaningful and positive impact to the lives of farmed animals. There are too many words to describe him. He's an author, ornithologist, photographer, naturalist, and animal advocate. So we're very pleased to be hosting Philip today. Thank you for being with us.
Tuğçe, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure being with you here today. And what an urgent subject, food technologies, eating without consuming the world. Because currently at the moment we are eating in a way which is consuming the world. And so I'm so pleased to be here with you today to talk about how we can change that in a beautiful, life-affirming way. So thank you so much, Tuğçe, again.
Yeah. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to share, if I may, some slides with you to illustrate what I'm looking to discuss with you today. So hopefully you can see this, the opening slide with the tree and food technologies. So, as has already been explained in the introduction, I'm the Global Chief Executive of Compassion in World Farming, a farm animal welfare environmental organization that is calling for change in the food system, an end to what we call factory farming, and we will look at that in more detail in a moment. I live on a farm hamlet in West Sussex, England. We as an organization are stationed across the world in 12 countries on 4 continents. The starting point for my presentation is that time is running out to change things. One of the big things that we need for our food, some of the big things we need, a stable climate, a thriving natural ecosystem, and of course the soil, which is responsible for 95% of our food. All of those things are currently in jeopardy. Let's take a look at why. But firstly, let me share with you, I have a walking companion here on the farm hamlet. This is my rescue dog, Duke, and we're out looking at the fields and woodlands around our home every single day. And we live beside 14 cows, our neighbours' 40 cows that are grazing as they should be, rough grass, and going up and down the local river valley. So we get to see in our locality the good things about the countryside, the good things about food production, but we also see the not so good. And here I want to share with you an opening story, if I may. So my dog Duke and I, we were out on our early morning walk, and we came across a tractor ploughing a field. The field was going, the tractor was going up and down, ploughing a lonely furrow. It, of course, was an iconic countryside scene that's been going on for centuries in one way or another. But there was something wrong. There was something missing from this scene. And when I focused on it, I could see that the plough was not being followed by any birds. There were no screeching gulls looking for an easy meal of worms where the soil had been turned upside down. The reason why there were no birds, as I could see very clearly when I got close, was that there were no worms. There was no beetles or other bugs scrambling to try and get back into the soil. The soil was lifeless. We could have been walking on the moon. That field was being planted with maize, with corn, a crop that is often intensively produced in monocultures using chemical pesticides and artificial fertilizers. In fact, that is exactly what was happening in this field yet again for another year. Much of that maize corn is fed to industrially reared animals on factory farms. And it reminded me of the link between the industrial production of animals and the industrial production of crops. They're two parts of the same food system, a food system that is consuming the world. It reminded me also of seeing feedlots cattle feedlots in America, in Nebraska, in the Midwest. And the Midwest of America is really where factory farming of animals was born. I remember seeing one of these cattle feedlots where the animals were out in the hot midday sun, the hot summer sun, without any shade, crammed together in pens without any grass at all. It was just simply a dust bowl. And I could see that the animals were so desperate to get some shade, of which there was none, that they were trying to lie down in each other's shadows. Sadly, factory farming is something which is now a global phenomena. You can find it in Turkey, you can find it across the European Union, in the UK, and just about every country on the planet. This is a battery cage where the chickens have been taken out of their woodland and pasture homes and put in cages so small they can't stretch their wings. Chickens reared for meat are put in airless barns in their tens of thousands and made to grow from tiny chicks to overgrown baby giants in just 6 weeks or less. Pigs, mother pigs, spend weeks, if not months at a time, in crates where they can't even turn around. They're made to spend their motherhood facing the wall. Factory farming in all of its guises, cattle being taken out of pastures and put into feedlots or into mega dairies where they won't experience the grass under their feet or the sun on their backs. This is a shot that I took of a feedlot in the US. This was for a research project I was doing recently. My latest book called 60 Harvests Left. I was due to be going to the feedlots in America and around the world, but of course it was during the COVID pandemic, so I couldn't get there. And I'd very much wanted to get those drone shots that you see, this kind of drone shot. But I was able to get this shot without leaving my study. This is a shot not done by a drone, but done by Google Earth. And I was able to locate feedlots and also to find the world's biggest feedlots. The world's biggest cattle feedlot that I've found is actually in South Africa, south of Johannesburg, where 160,000 cattle are in one place. They're not feeding hungry people in Africa. That feedlot is geared toward the export market for the Middle East and China. So we could see that factory farming has had a big impact on farmed animal welfare, causing a great deal of suffering. It's the biggest cause of animal suffering on the planet. Well, what also happens in that equation is that creating food in a way which takes away trees, bushes, hedges, and uses chemical pesticides and fertilizers means that the other biodiversity in the wider countryside takes a steep decline. And that is why well-known farmland birds like this barn owl and skylarks and lapwing are all in such steep decline. And it's not just birds, of course, pollinators, bees that are required for that are essential for the very existence of a third of all our food are also in decline. Factory farming, this way of producing crops and meat industrially, has an impact far and wide. It impacts creatures not just like birds and bees, but also these critically endangered Sumatran elephants, the jaguar, and whole Amazon ecosystems in South America, and even penguins and other seabirds are left starving because huge amounts of fish are scooped up from the sea to feed factory farmed animals. Essentially, what we're doing is we've become disconnected from the land, disconnected from the soil. We've been tearing up a millennia-old contract with the soil. When we moved as a species from being from being hunter-gatherers to becoming agricultural settlers. We signed a contract with the soil. If we look after the soil will look after us. But now the soil is disappearing. This is one idea of how fast soil is now disappearing under this industrial regime. This is a picture taken in the breadbasket of Britain, in the fens, Holme Fen. The top of the post is where the soil was in 1851. The bottom of the post is where it is now, and the soil is now just a metre deep in many areas and disappearing at nearly an inch every year. At that rate, the soil will be gone within 50 years. So we have a system that is staggeringly inefficient, this industrial agriculture. Food production covers half the habitable land surface of the planet. 83% of it is devoted to animal products, which give us just a third of our protein and less than a fifth of our calories, and produces more greenhouse gas emissions than the direct emissions of all the world's planes, trains, and cars put together. 40% of our global grain harvest is fed to intensively reared animals, not just maize, corn, but also soya, wheat, and other crops. That's enough food fed to these factory farmed animals to nourish 4 billion people, half of humanity alive today. What that equation tells you is that without factory farming, we could feed people better and with less farmland, not more. So what we can see is that our current food system is at the heart of what needs changing. It's the biggest cause of animal suffering. It's a major driver of wildlife declines. It is also integral to the climate emergency that we all face, and it's driving away our soils. So change is inevitable. And here's where food technology comes in, because I see the future as being something that we can now create. We have to create as a global society using a 3 R's approach: regenerating the countryside, rethinking our protein through food technologies, and rewilding, not least, the soil. So firstly, regenerating the countryside. What does that mean? Well, that means let's just stop using artificial fertilizers and chemical pesticides, stop keeping farmed animals in factory farms, and instead let the animals out. Bring them back to the countryside as living, breathing parts of a thriving ecosystem. More on that in a moment. But to do that, we need to reduce the overall amount of meat from farmed animals that we eat. We need to reduce the livestock population to make it fit within planetary boundaries. To avoid us busting the planet and essentially taking away the future for our children, we need to reduce consumption of animal products globally by the middle of the century by at least half. And in Europe, we need to reduce by 70% and show leadership by doing that by the end of by 2030. In the US, the challenge is greater, 80% reduction in the US by 2030. So how are we going to do that? By rethinking protein. One way is through new plant-based meat alternatives. And I'm always inspired by the quote from Pat Brown, the CEO of Impossible Foods, who says, unlike the cow, we're getting better at making meat every single day. But then there is also meat, but without the animals. Cultured meat or cultivated meat produced from stem cells in a bioreactor, which has much less greenhouse gas emissions than conventional meat, and needs just a fraction of the land to produce the same amount of food. It's already has seen its first commercial sale happening in Singapore in December 2020. And wide availability of cultivated meat, cultured meat from stem cells, is predicted within the next 5 to 10 years. A further technology that's worth putting on our radar is precision fermentation. Here we should think bread and wine, microbes and ingredients being put in stainless steel vessels, these microbes can be programmed to produce individual nutrients directly, individual protein molecules, which means that there are no animals involved. It's 100 times more land efficient than producing meat using conventional livestock. So there are technologies at hand which can help us reduce our overall dependence on farmed animals. And the animals that continue to exist in the system should be let out to help regenerate the countryside and help part of rewilding, so restoring our ecosystems, which will help not only the climate but ourselves, because the natural ecosystem is our life support system. So how do we do this? Well, for me, the biggest opportunity in rewilding is to rewild the soil. And here I suggest we bring back the elephant. Bring back the elephant to the countryside in Turkey, across Europe and in America. Well, here I'm not actually talking about huge 5-ton animals with long trunks and floppy ears. What I am talking about is bringing back the elephant's weight of biodiversity that should be under every healthy patch of soil the size of a football pitch. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by bringing back the farmed animals as part of that ecosystem. Instead of that wormless field that I talked about, having seen near home with Duke, every soccer pitch patch of healthy soil should have 4 million worms. It should hold 13,000 species that weigh a total of 5 tons, about the size of an elephant. And how do we do this? Well, we keep the soil covered up using cover crops in the off-season. We mix it up using a rich diversity of crops rotationally. We leave the soil the right way up, so avoiding ploughing. But we turbo boost soil health by returning farmed animals to mixed rotational farms. In this way, with a 3 R's approach, regenerating the countryside, rethinking our protein, and rewilding the soil, we can go a long way to reversing climate change, to restoring nature, to having healthy food. And rather like this mother sooty tern, one of the creatures that is affected by pulling out fish for factory farms, you can see that she's very proudly looking at her egg. Well, look closely at the egg and you can see that egg is hatching. And this, to me, is what this conference is all about. It's taking that egg that we need food technology to help us to eat without consuming the world. And it may seem challenging at first, but give it time and that egg will grow, will hatch, will spread their wings into something beautiful. And that is why I believe that conferences like this are so important. This conversation is so important because time is running out. We have just 60 harvests left before the soils are gone. That's what the UN is telling us. That's what the calculations are telling us. And here is a very short video just to give you a feel for how we can turn that around. what we do next has never mattered more. By rethinking protein, regenerating the countryside, and by rewilding the soil, by getting animals out of factory farms and reducing the overall numbers, using food technology as part of an overall food system change is the way to create a better future for animals, people, and the planet, and save the future for our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Philip, for that strong introduction. I feel like I have a responsibility for doing some of these things that you mentioned as well. Hopefully, some of our listeners have some good takeaways from this talk as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully,
Pleasure.
you get to stay around.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
Evet, Philip'in bu güçlü girişinden sonra bir sonraki panelimize geçiyoruz şimdi. Dediğim gibi başta da geleceğe bakıyoruz şu an. O yüzden bir sonraki panelimiz de bir bu kadar anlamlı. Gıda sektöründe 2050'ye bakış yapacağız şimdi bir sonraki panelimizle. Sustain Finance'ten Kübra Koldemir'in moderasyonuyla aramızda Levent Kurnaz Boğaziçi Üniversitesi'nden, Ipsos'tan Yasemin Özen ve Yuvam Dünya'dan Kıvılcım Kocabıyık bizimle olacak. Şimdi bir çok kısacık bir ara ile birkaç saniye ile bir sonraki panelimize geçiyor oluruz.